You look to your money manager to give you guidance on your investments, but who's advising them? David Macchia is the founder and CEO of Wealth 2K, and welcome to the Language of Business.
Good to be here.
How does Teach the Teacher work?
Well, financial advisors are skilled. They deal with people and help them accumulate money, always. But when people's needs change, when they move from that time of life where they've been accumulating savings to now having to turn it into sustainable retirement income, many financial advisors are not expert at that function. So my company comes in to provide them the tools, the software, the educational training that they need to successfully guide clients.
Is that an age or an experience problem or something else?
It's a convention problem. Advisors are taught early on to maximize someone's growth of capital. But when you get into the challenge of turning capital into income, new skills, new insights, new investing methods are needed.
Do they implement 100% of your recommendations?
Most advisors will follow the core recommendation, which is that if you're working with the type of investor who gets to retirement with savings, which is great, but the amount of their savings is not so much relative to the amount of monthly income that they need to create, then they need a very special type of investing methodology. And they do, in those cases, recommend what we prescribe.
Are you the only person providing them counsel, or are there other people involved as well?
Well, our firm specializes in this. It's a growing, but still a new business.
The Department of Labor changes regarding fiduciary. How does that factor into what you're teaching your advisors?
It overarches everything. And the Department of Labor's focus is on costs, and that's good. But I wish it were more on risks. Because what happens is when you make this change, when you move from accumulating your assets to distributing those assets, to turning those into sustainable monthly income, you have to be more focused on risks that can devastate retirement security. Like what happens if I pick a bad year to retire, like 2000 or 2008? Or what happens if my income doesn't keep pace with rising prices? Or what happens if I live longer than I expect to? Could I outlive my income? Those kinds of concerns and risks need to be mitigated in a financial strategy that retirement income advisors are getting more and more skilled at.
Isn't that something a good advisor should be able to find out on their own, though, without your counsel?
Not really, because that's not part of the standard operating teaching of a financial advisor. Again, they're more focused on accumulating money and asset allocation. But once we get into this changed idea of turning assets into income, it really requires new methodologies and new thinking.
Do you have a new fiduciary responsibility as well?
We're not deemed to be the fiduciary because we're not actually the ones investing money for a client, but we're providing the framework, the idea and the intellectual framework for them to be able to do it properly. They in turn will be fiduciaries to their clients in all cases.
How much of what goes on behind the scenes actually gets dispensed to the individual consumer?
Well, like any business, there's a behind the scenes, there's a backstage and a front stage. I think what's going to happen in the DOL world is that consumers will have their interests served. The best interests of the consumer will be served in all cases. That doesn't necessarily mean that the financial advisor dealing as a fiduciary with an investor will be providing the best representation of their needs when it comes to retirement income.
But there are several links in the chain. It goes from the DOL to you, to the advisors, to the clients themselves.
Well, it really goes from the DOL to what the DOL deems as a financial institution, and those could be broker-dealers, they could be banks, they could be registered investment advisors, and the client. But in all cases, the financial advisor dealing with the client is going to have to observe the investor's best interests.
What keeps you up at night about your clients?
What keeps me up at night are millions of Americans that I would call constrained investors. There are these folks who have some savings, but it's not so much that they have the luxury of making mistakes when they get to be age 65. People have to be really careful about how they deploy their money. And if they're not careful, one of these risks that I mentioned earlier could really derail their financial security. So they need special handling, and that's the thing that worries me.
David, thank you.
You're very welcome.
David Macchia, founder and CEO of Wealth 2K.